Hello everyone. I wanted to give you a review of this latest set of Wargames rules from Warwick Kinrade. They're called Soldiers of Napoleon, and they follow on from some of his other titles which I'm very fond of: Soldiers of God and Soldiers of Rome. What I'm going to do is just talk to you about the rules in this video. I will put up a video of a demo game very soon, but wanted to try and keep it a little bit briefer than my usual kind of 3 hour epics. So just talk to you about the rules to begin with. Yeah, these rules took me a little bit by surprise. As I say, I'm a big fan of Soldiers of God and Soldiers of Rome, and I knew that there was going to be another title in the series coming out. So I've been kind of habitually going to North Star's website to see whether the page that features all the Artoris publications booklets has been updated, and been waiting and waiting, and nothing's appeared. As I say, I knew he was working on another set of rules, but I was anticipating, I'd heard that it was going to be something like the 100 Years' War period, something like that. So it took me completely by surprise to discover, that it was he'd written a set of rules for the Napoleonic era, because I really couldn't see how the mechanics of the two games, Soldiers of God and Soldiers of Rome and Soldiers of God, you can see here they're very similar format books, and they're virtually identical games. The mechanics and everything are very similar in them, and all that's changed is that there are different packs of cards. So the cards are specifically, written to describe aspects of ancient history or the Crusades. And I just couldn't work out how he was going to produce a set of rules in the Napoleonic era that were at all similar to those previous two titles. Now, on before I ordered the rules immediately, and they're actually produced or sold through Gripping Beast now rather than North Star Games. That's the other thing that took me by surprise. Before I got the rules, it's possible to download the quick reference sheet from Gripping Beast's website, and it was pretty obvious just even looking at this that the mechanics of the game are completely different. So in a way, all that he's retained is the Soldiers of prefix to the rules. At first glance, there is very little similarity between this and the quick reference sheets for the previous two set of rules. As I say, it also took me by surprise that Gripping Beast were doing it, but it's pretty obvious once you've got the rules why that is, and it's because, as we all know, Gripping Beast took over the range of Front Ranks models, and they're using these rules. They see a nice kind of dovetailing of the two now, so they're using these rules to promote Front Ranks range of Napoleonic figures, so it makes sense for them to have done it. So the whole thing has shifted away from North Star now, and you get these rules through Gripping Beast. So they're also card driven, but as I say, very different. But at the same time, you can tell that they are written by the same author. It's hard to sort of put my finger on it, but it's pretty obvious that they come from the same mind. More on that later, anyway. So I've had to write down a lot of notes because rather than just talking spontaneously as is my want, there's an awful lot to say about these rules. So I've had to write down a number of things to keep me on track. Um, yeah, I really like this card-driven aspect of all three sets of rules because it allows the games to be far more narrative driven somehow, and these rules work just as well as Soldiers of God and Soldiers of Rome. Unfortunately, there are a few things that I was critical about Soldiers of Rome, and similar kind of issues have arisen with Soldiers of Napoleon. It's not to detract from the rules themselves, which I think are very good, but there are a couple of things that I could still criticise about Soldiers of Napoleon. One is that even though it's been proofread and so on, there are still typos and spelling errors in it. I mean, not too many, but it always bugs me. And I think part of the problem is that there's too much reliance nowadays from publishing firms on spell checks rather than knowledge of spelling, and it makes it very easy for words to be miswritten rather than misspelt. Because if a word is spelt correctly, if it's then mistaken for the correct word, the spell check won't pick it up. So a simple thing like the word was, W-A-S, and the word has, H-A-S, have completely different meanings, but one can replace the other and does in various places in this book. So there's a few things like that. It just niggles me. It never seemed to be the case with books in general that you got so many typos. So Soldiers of Napoleon isn't uncommon. It's just something that I would criticise. But the other thing that is definitely a problem is that, like Soldiers of Rome, it seems to have been edited to remove, to prune it down a little bit to get it to fit into, even though it's on a larger paper size and so on. They have obviously had to edit a lot of it out in order to get it more compact, and that has caused a bit of a problem with the actual contents. Now, if you at the very beginning of the book, in one of the first sentences, it reads, "Welcome to Soldiers of Napoleon, a set of card-driven tabletop miniature war games rules for the battles of the Napoleonic the Napoleonic Wars, 1805 to 1815. Now, great, that describes what it's all about, except that when you go towards the back of the book, it starts with the War of the Sixth Coalition, which began in 1813. So in other words, what happened to 1805 to 1812? It's not here in the book, and that doesn't matter because each war. So there are only two wars, in fact, that it's dealing with. Not 10 years of Napoleonic wars. It's still dealing with the two wars of 1813 to 14 and 1815. So the wars of the Sixth Coalition and the Seventh Coalition, and it does change. You'll find that the army lists are different. So there's a Grand Army War of the Sixth Coalition list for the French, but in 1815 there's an Armée du Nord, and they have different characteristics and so on, and features and various modifiers that you have to apply to when you're building the army list up. So everything prior to 1813 is missing, and it does confuse, it certainly confused me on first glance, because there's quite a lot of preamble to setting up a game, building your army, determining its tactical advantages over the opponent's army, working out the army breakpoints and so on. And you need to have those lists that I just showed you. But the example they give on page 53 for selecting an army is the game will be a core-sized battle of 1,000 points for the War of the Fourth Coalition. It will be a French army and must have 3 brigades to deploy and 1 in reserve ready to fight the Russians. So it goes through in great detail selecting an army for a war that it doesn't actually give you the army lists for in the back of the book. And as I say, it's quite complicated and complex to actually construct your army at the beginning, and it's giving you examples such as, say, the French operational advantage is +3 for the War of the Fourth Coalition, and they have 2 scouts. Now, as I say, if you're trying to get your head around what are operational advantages and so on, and what do all these various features mean, it would be much handier if it actually dealt with an army list that you could refer to in the back of the book. It doesn't. And I think what's happened, as I say, is that the author had originally included lists for all the wars, so the Fourth and the Fifth Coalitions, as well as the Sixth and the Seventh. And the editor has decided there are too many pages in the book and has pruned them out. But then the proofreader is just reading the book for spelling mistakes and make sure that it makes sense and so on. And he's not really interested in the mechanics of the rules and understanding the rules himself. He wants to make sure that the English is correct and the grammar is correct. So he wouldn't spot things like that. And it's not, they're not an easy set of rules to get your head around, or at least they're not for my poor brain. And things like that get really confusing the first time you read through the book until you realise what has actually happened. Now, I think Napoleonic buffs will actually like these rules. If a lot of Napoleonic sort of purists don't like rules like Black Powder. I happen to really like Black Powder, but with Black Powder, what people who do like Napoleonic Wargaming channel, he's a great lover of Black Powder. What he's done is he likes Black Powder, and he uses his knowledge of the Napoleonic era to select certain features for the troop types and so on. And also there are a lot of supplements to Black Powder now covering the Napoleonic Wars in particular. This book is very different though, because Black Powder is a generic set of rules for the Black Powder era. This is specifically for the Napoleonic Wars, and in fact, as you can see, just for the 2 last wars. You can't use it now even for earlier wars, because you need to know the army aspects in order to apply the rules. So it's only of use for the 6th and 7th Coalition wars, nothing earlier. So I can't use this, say, to play Crimean war games even. It's just not suited. So it's the opposite of a generic set of rules. It's a very specific set of rules for 2 wars set during the Napoleonic era. And I think, but in terms of the Napoleonic buff, I think they would probably prefer that to using using Black Powder and tweaking the rules. So it compares favourably to black powder in my mind, and it's certainly, because I'm a big fan of black powder, it's certainly won me over, and I will be using these rules for my Napoleonic games going forward. Now, there are certain disadvantages to that, though. For me in particular, I found composing armies from my collection of figures very difficult. I had no problem with my French figures, collection of figures, but a long time ago now I had a catastrophe where I had my armies all stacked up in a big pile, and my Russian Napoleonic army was near the top, and they fell about 6 feet onto the floor, and a lot of the figures were just irreparable. You know, there were just so many rifles and heads broken off in that it was just a complete disaster. So I don't have a great many. I don't have an army to match the French army. So what I've been in the habit of doing is combining my Russian and Austrian forces and playing games with a combined Russo-Austrian kind of alliance, fighting against the French. And you can do that with black powder, absolutely no problem. No way can you do that with soldiers of Napoleon. It's basically a very specific division level game. And when I say division level, it's not quite division level. What it deals with is an area of the battlefield which is the divisional area. So in other words, you could play it either as a division level game or a corps level game, where the corps commander appears on the battlefield occasionally, or you could even play it as an army level game, with the army commander, such as Wellington or Napoleon, appearing on the battlefield. But you're playing the divisional commander, so you've got various brigades under your command, but you have access to brigades possibly from other areas of the battlefield, or grand batteries, you know, further back in behind the lines and so on. So you're dealing with a very kind of small area of a battle that might be much larger, or with an area that is just concerns your divisions. So you can choose to play either a small division or a large divisional game, or a corps game, or an army game, but you will only ever be in charge of a division, be it large or small. So that makes it very difficult from my point of view. It means that I can't combine a Russian and an Austrian army together. You have to be a lot more rigid in your discipline and stick to army lists and so on. So for instance, with my Russian figures that I have got left, salvaged from the great disaster, let's find the Russian army list from, so I should have made a note of the page. Right, here we go. War of the Sixth Coalition, Russia. So I have, for instance, still in one piece some Jaegers, for instance. Now, I can't combine into one brigade my Jaegers with my line infantry. They're in two completely separate brigades. I only have a limited number of points. I don't have 500. Points are worked out on stands. You can see here. No, that's the artillery. But basically, each stand will cost you a certain number of points, and a unit can be composed of 2 to 6 stands in general. Sometimes it's a bit less than that. But I can't put my Jaegers into the same brigade as my musketeers, and at the same time, because I've got very few points, I'm only kind of able to play either a small or a large divisional game. So that is going to be either 2 or 3 brigades and no bigger than that. So all my figures spread over too many different types of brigade. So I've got some Pavlovsky Grenadiers. So that's a third brigade. It would have to go into a third brigade. I've got some light cavalry. I've got some hussars. That's another brigade again. I've got some cuirassiers. So that's a heavy brigade. So already you're talking about having to split my paltry collection of Russian figures up into 5 brigades, which is almost, it's too many. The maximum I can have is 3, so I'm constricted in that respect. And again, both the Russian Grenadier Brigade and the Russian Heavy Brigade are both reserve formations, so they have to be kept off the tabletop at the beginning of the game. There's no way you can have them on the tabletop at the beginning of the game. There's no restrictions like that in Black Powder. I just put them on the table and get on with it. I would much rather have this realism. I'm not criticising it, but it does make things very difficult for me to play this game straight off. I'm gonna have to build up another army now, a Russian army, designed to play using these rules. So that's going to take a bit of time. So it's a bit frustrating in a way. So, for instance, another example of that is my French army, of which I have got a lot of figures. I have to basically, if I'm going to have a balanced game, and you have to balance the points. I'm not going to be able to play all of my French figures for the time being against the Russians, and I certainly couldn't put in an Austrian element to that opponent army either, as you can see. So, for instance, I'm going to have to pare down. I've got too many French at the moment, but I would really like to play my Polish Lancers of the Guard, because I'm really fond of them. But where do they belong in this army list? They belong with I can't find it now. Yeah, here they are. Imperial Guard Light Cavalry Brigade. So it's a reserve formation and a unique formation. So you can only have one brigade of this type, and it has to be kept off the table at the beginning of the game. Both issues for me, because you have to start off with 2 brigades on the table. So a reserve formation can only be used in a large divisional game, of which I don't really, they recommend more than 500 points for that, so I don't really have enough. But the Polish Lancers, as you can see, you can have 0 to 1 regiment of Polish Lancers, but you have to have 1 horse artillery battery. So this isn't regular horse artillery, this is guard artillery, and I don't have it. So in order for me legitimately to put my Polish Lancers on the table, I'm going to have to at least paint up 1 battery of guard artillery. So even though I've got a lot of French figures, I still can't put, if I was to find an opponent who had a large enough army to fight, I still couldn't put my Polish Lancers on the table until I got that artillery battery painted up. So in a way, it's good, but in a way, it's a big disadvantage for me at the moment. And I really would like to play more of these rules, and I'm kind of constrained from doing so at the moment. One of the big advantages, though, and it's the same. It's a different sort of side to the same problem, is that we all, or I do anyway, and I've seen so many other people do it, is we all paint up figures, that are far too senior to actually appear on the tabletop. Now, so I've got Napoleon. He's never, he's never going to appear realistically in a in a small kind of battle such as we play with Black Powder. But you can use him. You can use your Wellingtons. You can use your Bluchers, because they come and go on the battlefield. So so you can roll to see if the corps commander or the army commander appears, and that will give you certain benefits during the game. It will generate more cards for you to play with and so on in your hand. So that's the sort of opposite problem to what I've got with my Polish dancers, in that I am able to bring these senior figures onto the table and use them once I've got a large enough force, to make it relevant that I'm playing with 5 brigades, say, rather than just my paltry 2 or 3 that I have to at the moment. So I really like that. I really like the fact that there's scope to play with all these interesting personality figures that you've painted up, take great pride in. And the other thing is that you do need lots and lots of command stands. So in fact, I haven't got enough. I'm having to kind of press gang figures like British officers and Austrian officers, even at the moment, into my Russian army in order to have stands that represent command stands. But you can also use command figures to represent the command points that the divisional commander has. So you can have a stand that's got the divisional commander, which is required in the game, but you can dot around him a number of stands matching the number of command points that he's rolled for at the beginning of the game. And then as you use those command points, you just take the figures off. So figures like aide de camp and guards and so on that you might have dotted around. So I've got that for the French. I haven't got it for the Russians yet, so that's another thing that I'm going to have to paint up. But I really like that. I think that will be very popular with a lot of the war gamers, that they can bring their personalities onto the table, and they're specialist figures that often don't see, they're just there for decoration in a lot of games. As I say, it's a divisional area game rather than a divisional level game. There is a sort of subtle difference in it. And I'm not aware, I mean, it's possibly the case, that there are other war games rules that have done that, but it does strike me as a quite a novel approach. People often say, how many times can you reinvent the wheel? There are so many Napoleonic rules out there, but I think that is quite innovative. I'm not aware of any other games that deal with the sort of war games rules so that they represent a small area of a battle, that's taking place around the table and to one side, each side of the table and behind it. There are some familiar mechanisms in it. So for instance, the pages at the back of the book with the troop types in, I mean, this almost looks, I don't know whether they've deliberately aped Black Powder, but this almost looks like pages from Black Powder. So you have different troop types. So let's go to something I've been discussing already. So you have the Russian infantry here, and you have musketeer infantry with their various statistics. You've got the Jaegers here. Each troop type, or many of the troop types, have special rules as well, so that's very similar to black powder. So in the case of the Jaegers, they are stoic. That means that they can absorb more. They're not casualties as such. They use a mechanism called disruption. But then in order to rally disruption off, one of the things you can do, I'll go into this again in a little bit in a moment, is you can remove figures, but you remove stands, and then that allows you to remove two disruption markers. But with stoic, if you remove a stand, it allows you to remove three. They're light infantry. That means that they can be placed in extended order and have movement benefits. And they're also skirmishers, which means they can throw skirmishers out in front of their line. So that kind of thing is not the same as black powder, but it's similar kind of mechanisms. The big difference, of course, is that they are card driven, and the cards can all be played. Let's get them out of the pack. So that's the back of the cards. The cards can all be played in three different ways. So basically, at the start of each turn, you start off with two cards automatically, and then you get a card for each command stand that you have on the field. So say in a 3 brigade game, you would have two automatically. You would have a card for each brigade stand that you got on the table, and you would have one for the divisional command stand, which is you. So you would start off with, what's that, 6? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, 6 cards. If any of those command stands, though, had been at risk, as it's described, in the previous turn, so an enemy unit had come within 10 paces of them, so for 28mm game, you would probably be using inches. So if any enemy unit had come within 10 inches of your command stand, then that is technically putting the command stand at risk. So you wouldn't be allowed a card for that next turn, because he'd be too busy looking after his own safety. And in fact, if you rolled you have to roll a d6 for every unit that has come within 10 inches of him. So, and if you roll a 1, then he's obliged to retire away from the enemy up to 20 inches, but it doesn't have to be that far. But basically, it stops you drawing a card for him the next turn. Now, the cards can be played in 3 different ways. The large number in the circle there, 4, is the number of orders that you can give to a brigade. So you can just nominate a brigade command stand and put that card down next to it, and the brigade commander is allowed to issue 4 orders to the units in his under his command. He can't order other brigades. There's no sort of cross ordering, as it were. 4 orders isn't actually very much at all, because orders become more expensive the further away the unit is from the commander. Anything within 10 inches takes 1 order. In order to order a unit that's up to 20 inches away requires 2, and up to 30 inches requires 3. Anything over 30 inches can't be commanded by the brigade commander. So you can see that if you had a couple of units in the brigade that were more than 10 inches away from the brigade stand, that would immediately take all of that order allowance up. There are a whole list of orders that you can make. Here's some of them. These are on the quick reference guide. So you can order the unit to march, withdraw, manoeuvre, change formation, march at the quick, make a cautious advance, charge, volley fire, skirmish fire, bombard, limber or unlimber, relay the guns, harass, and intimidate. Now, some of those can only be done by certain units. Obviously, limbering and unlimbering can only be done by artillery. Harassing is a mechanism that light cavalry can do. Intimidate is one that heavy cavalry can do, and so on. But a lot of them are standard for all units. So that's your orders. Another interesting mechanic is that if you then use your next card, so you alternate player to player in playing the cards, the player with the initiative playing first. If you then, when your turn came round again, were to play another card on the same brigade for orders, then that would begin to tire any units that you gave orders to in that brigade. So you're better off kind of spreading your orders around and not tiring, the units out. And tiring is just giving them disruption markers. So that's the orders. Then you've got most of the cards have special events, which is the middle part of the card. Now these can be played at any time, and this is where the kind of narrative-driven aspect of the game comes in. So, for instance, here you've got a special event called Ride Them Down, which is a single heavy cavalry unit may charge an enemy infantry unit in disorder, even if they are infantry in square formation. In the following melee, the cavalry's hit rolls are increased to 2+. So this is the only instant. Normally in the rules, cavalry can't charge infantry in square, but if they're in disorder and you get this card, that's when you can charge with cavalry a unit in square. So it's not easy to do, but it can be done. Now with special events, you can play special events doesn't apply. That rule about consecutive orders doesn't apply to special events. And the other thing about special events is that if you roll a dice, it's d6, and if you roll a 4+ in this case on a d6, then you can immediately take another turn and play another card. It doesn't have to be for another special event. It could be to play orders or something like that. So you can get play of 2 or more cards in a row if you're playing that, if you dice successfully. And the third part of the card is that in order to get rid of the disruption markers, you have to rally units. So again, you could play this consecutive to an orders turn. Rallying and special events neither have to conform to the consecutive orders rule, but you can attempt to rally all the units in one particular brigade, as long as they match the troop types that are listed there. So you can see here, this one can only rally trained, seasoned, professional and elite, whereas this one can only rally seasoned, professional and elite, and this one can rally all 5 types: militia, trained, seasoned, professional and elite. Rallying, I'm going to show you an example of how you rally, because it is quite it's not convoluted, but it's different from, it's not just rolling a dice like you do in Black Powder and trying to get above a morale dice roll. It's a lot more thought has to go into it than that. But when you do attempt to rally, you immediately give 2 victory points in this particular case to your enemy, and your army, from the convoluted construction of your army at the beginning of the game, which I'm not going to go into because it's quite involved, but that will give you a break point for the army, and in order to break the opponent's army, you have to get more victory points than their break point is. So by rallying, you're immediately gifting the enemy, in this case, 2 victory points. In some cases it's only 1. There might be cards, there's some that are 0, It varies. I don't think there are any with 3. But anyway, let's show you. So this is just as an example. Firing and meleeing are pretty familiar mechanisms, but the rally mechanism is slightly different than anything I've ever come across in a set of Wargames rules before. So you play the card, give the opponent the victory points on the card, and then same type of things apply, that if the brigade commander wants to rally a unit under his command, it has to be within 30 inches. And then you have to go through in order. You can't go back and do the first manoeuvre second or something like that. So you have to go through these 4 steps. The first one is that you can pull your unit back, and if you make a full withdrawal move, which is half your normal move distance, then you can automatically take 1 point of disruption off. Then you can choose to, you might choose that you're not going to do that. You don't want to give ground, so you just skip that stage, but you can't go back to it having gone on to the second stage. Then you rally on the colours, which is for every disruption marker that you've got left, you roll a d6, and if you score a 6 you can get rid of another one. And then depending on how successful you've been at that, you can then start taking stands off. And if you take with a normal unit, if you take a stand off, you can remove another 2 disruption markers. If it's got that stoic quality, which the Jaegers had, for instance, you can take 3 off. And the idea is basically to get it down to a reasonable number of disruption markers. And what is a reasonable number? Well, if you've got more disruption markers than you have stands, then your unit immediately becomes disordered. So you definitely want it below the number of stands you've got. If you at the end of the turn you've still got more disruption markers on your unit than you have stands, that unit is taken off the table as broken. So you've got to kind of do the calculation, how many stands do I need to take off in order to make it safe so that my unit isn't going to break at the end of the turn. So you just got to do the maths for that. And then finally, having taken casualties, you can then attempt, as long as you've got less than the number of, as long as it's not equal to the number of stands that you've got, as long as you've got less disruption markers than stands, then you can attempt to reorder, and that's just passing a discipline test. As long as you're not within 5 inches of an enemy unit, you can do that. So you could get your unit in the rallying status process. You can either just get dispersal points off, or you might, if you're lucky, be able to reorder them as well. So that's basically how rallying works, and it's quite, again, I think that's quite an innovative mechanism. I've not come across anything like that before. So he has, as I say, you can tell Warwick Kinrade is very good, I think, at sort of inventing rules like that, and you can tell that he is the same author as Soldiers of God and Soldiers of Rome. Just in his style of rule writing, I suppose, is what I'm trying to say. Now I think that's everything I wanted to talk about. I've probably gone on for quite a long time already, so I'll stop there. I am going to put up a practice game of it to show you. I've already had a game of it and tried the rules out, and I think they work very well. The constraints from my point of view is that I can only have small games, so it's not going to be a particularly interesting game to watch, especially as my figures are, some of them are like 30, 40 years old, and old minifigs and things like that, so there's not even going to be a visual appeal to the game, but it'll give you an idea of how the basic mechanisms work. And I'll just put it in a separate video so that this one doesn't go on for too long, and look forward to that. So thanks very much for watching, and see you on the next video. Bye for now.